Hey, welcome back to Bridal Sewing Techniques, and today we're going to talk about how to shorten the waist of a low open back gown. Now, I know I've done a video on how to shorten the waist of a gown before, but this is a little different. The open back that is low produces a completely different set of challenges that I want to help you with. This video is not just going to be involving sketches, but I'm also going to show you some real life examples of how to fit the gown, figure out how you need to shorten it. I'm also going to let you see photos and slides of me doing this actual alteration on actual gowns. So that's going to be super helpful. Just hang in there with me and I'm going to deliver all of this great information to you today.
What are some telltale signs that we see when a bride comes in with a gown that has a waist that is much too long? Number one, the first indicator could simply be her height. If she's 5'2" or 5'3" and she's trying to get into a gown that was made for somewhere between 5'10" and 6'2", it's likely that the bodice of the gown is going to be too short for her. There are some exceptions. So a lot of times you'll also see as another indicator, the women with the very long waists often have quite a flat stomach for what their weight may or may not be. The women with the short waist, they a lot of times will have what they call a pooch, and they'll have that pooch. It can be quite stubborn, even if they are even a little bit underweight. Sometimes that pooch still stays there. It's just because they don't have the length to distribute everything. It's not that they have any more fat than a long-waisted counterpart. It's just there's nowhere to put it. That's the talk about what you can expect just by looking at a basic body type. Now let's look at what the dress does when you put it on the body. Obviously, this is the front view. For this video, I'm using this color for the body lines, and I'm using the black for the dress. So often you will see a bride come in complaining of wrinkles in the torso, some wrinkling or even some bowing out of the boning. The underarms of the dress a lot of times will be all up in her business. Sometimes she'll get some wrinkles real fast right below this waistline. That's just because her hips are happening a little faster than what the gown was designed to accommodate. So the skirt of the gown is trying to inch its way up.
And I do show how to alter the skirt portion in this video as well,
so that it'll fit appropriately over her hips. You'll often see a great deal of excess in the strap length. This can really be where you end up having a problem. A lot of times they come in, particularly for modest brides, they come in liking where the V of the sweetheart or the V of the deep V is hitting on their body. This right here is where a lot of the grief and woe comes in. And then also if she turns to the side, let me show you the look that you'll get. This is the apex of her bust. What you're going to see is the straps come up, the apex here a little tight at her natural apex, the wrinkling, and then the sitting on the natural waist. So the apex of the dress is sitting too high. So when she turns to the side, she's often going to complain like, why is the bust of the dress so high? Can you pull it down? But that's where you get into this trouble. If you simply pull it down, then she can often be upset because you'll have this look, way too much cleavage for what she was looking at when she bought the gown. And then also at that point, you often cannot zip the gown because the waist wants to extend so much further at that point than the waist of the bride. So basically what you're looking at is you're having to let it out from here to here to get the waist of the gown to line up with her waist. You're going to have to let the waist of the gown out to the measurement of her hip. And a lot of times there's just not enough fabric in there for that. So I'm going to show you in this video how we shorten the waist, trying to negotiate all these issues that come up when you have to change this many fit points of a gown on the bride's body. Now, when we look at the back, remember this video is specifically talking about a low open back. Okay, so I just put like 2 or 3 buttons there. It's quite low. You will see some of the same indicators. The straps will be sitting up high. You will have the dress wrinkling up across the back is super common, along the sides. And then sometimes, like I was saying, sometimes you have the bowing out on the side. You'll have those really quick wrinkles running along the top of the skirt. Sometimes you'll have a big wave in the zipper. The lining is fitted. Then you'll also have the wrinkling at the top part of her hips. This can be a similar situation. She may have fell in love with this part of the dress, the way it looks. And she was overlooking this and this and this. And these are the landmarks that she wants to see when the dress fits her on her body. So we're going to talk about specifically how to retain the same kind of shape back here of what you're seeing, the same shape in the exposure of her back, the same amount, the back being the same length. And then we're going to talk about some different solutions in the front. This is one of the more common troubleshooting questions that I get in emails and DMs, by the way. If you're ever stuck on a gown, just email me or DM me. DMing me on Instagram is actually the best because I can send you a voice memo and I can send you sketches from my phone. I do charge for consulting if we get into like big time consuming consulting, but that's pretty rare. I can actually usually just fire off a solution. And then if you want, you can just, buy me a coffee or something. I have links for that. And that's normally as deep as we go for quick little questions like that. Do keep in mind that I host retreats. You can come to my studio and sit right by me as I work and see how I run my shop, see my sourcing, the details of how everything is laid out, and we do some business plan talking after hours together. I have information about that on my blog. If you want to see that, you can go to bridalsewingtechniques.com and go to the blog and read about that. And you can also always, if you have questions about products that I use, you're getting ready to see me sew here in a bit. If you have questions about those things, I do have a products page on my website that you can go to, and there's Amazon links to get the things that I work with. Let me show you how I am going to kind of attack this sewing project. It's certainly a multi-pronged approach. For this alteration, I alter the front completely different from the back. What? Yes, I do. Let me also add some side seams here. I disconnect here, completely disconnect. And I completely open the side seam all the way around the front. Okay. Now the numbers that I'm going to work off of are no numbers here. I'm just going to open it, and this is going to be adjusted later. What I do when she is trying on the dress is I unzip the back of the dress and I look to see where her natural waist is hitting and look to see where the apex of the bust should be. So I get her in the dress, I unzip the dress, I wiggle it down. This is how it looks from the back, okay? This is her natural waist. I'm going to hook just at the very top. Most of the time they do hook at the very top. If they don't, you have to reconcile that first to really get a good fitting on this. And then I go ahead and let the zipper lay completely open. This is why you might want to tell your brides if they might want to wear leggings or undergarments that they're comfortable in. And then I'm going to, with my fingers, press to find her natural waist. I'm going to shimmy this down and look at her from the side as well. I'm going to make sure that the apex of the bust of the dress aligns with the apex of her bust. I don't care so much about the shoulders. I'm looking at the bust needs to be lined up, and the waist. I want to see, this is going to have boning in it, okay? This is probably going to be where the skirt of the dress starts. And the only reason why I'm able to get that crunch in it instead of it looking like this while it's open is because I'm pushing with my fingers. Once I do that, I look at this length. It's often on a petite bride gonna be something like 5.5. It might be less than that. If you have a long-waisted dress, you might see a waist that's going to be 7 inches. Okay, like from here to here, 7. And then when you see her in it, you're like, wow, she only has a 5-inch long waist or a 5.5-inch long waist. Disconnect, completely disconnect, all the way to the waist of the dress, not just the 5.5. You're going to go all the way to the waist. Okay. So this front piece is just going to be like laying here, free as a breeze. These are your seam allowances. Laying there free as a breeze. Your skirt is going to be over here somewhere else. They're going to be completely disconnected. Notice I did not say disconnect the back of the gown. So this is how your skirt is actually going to look. Got your buttons in the back. This is a skirt hanging loose in the front that we've separated from the front. The whole back is still on there. This is your front. The mistake that I've seen people make that you do not want to make, and that this video really is taking a deep dive about, is you don't want to just separate this and shorten the waist of this just as you would here. Let's see what will happen if we take the back off as well. And if we, like, let's say this is 7 inches long, and just for clean math, let's say her waist is 5 inches, okay? We need it to be 5, and then there's like 2 extra inches. We're going to cut this off here. That's going to be your alteration there to shorten the bodice in the front. That is going to lower the front, and that's something that we'll talk about in a bit. I'm going to show you 2 different ways to shorten this front, okay? For the brides that really freak out about this coming down too low. This is not a short video, as you can tell. There's a lot that goes into this alteration. This is intense, and you can wreck this dress. So that's why I want to go over all of the different options that you have and definitely cover the don'ts, okay? Let me show you what happens if we shorten the waist of the back of the dress, like right here. This is going to fit right because you tightened it, right? This length is going to fit right. But her dress, you're going to find it swoop in at the sides, and it's not going to meet in the back anymore. That's how it's going to look if you shorten the back. She may be cool with that. Most brides will not be cool with that. But if you cut out 2 inches here, you've cut out this entire piece. And you've got to look at where is this swoop connecting here once you shorten it. Certainly once you bring it in at the sides. That's what you get. And your bride's going to be really upset. Really upset. And there's not much else you can do to fix that. You're going to have to completely remake the back if you make this mistake. That's why we're going to leave this attached. When we go to reattach this, what we're going to do, like I said, is shorten the front by the 2 inches. Literally just cut the front off of the waistline of the dress. So that looks like this part across here. We're just going to chuck it. Okay. Then wherever we take in the dress to tighten it, we're not going to want to tighten this back part because that's what's going to pull this forward. We want to try to take everything in at the front of the seam, okay, in front, and possibly the apex of the bust of the dress if the princess seams and the cups are just sticking out too far, okay? You're going to take in the size in these 2 places. This means when you go to reattach the dress, you reattach the front of the dress. Let me show you how it's going to look, okay? It's going to look messed up the first time you get it on her. We're going to sew all this back together here. This part is going to be fit right. This is going to stay loose all the way till close to the end. You can pin it while you work on it, but we're not concerned about getting this to fit right now. Don't sew that and sew it and unsew it and pick it and sew it and just chew it up. Don't do that. All right, so we've done that. We fit the bodice to where the apex of the bust of the dress is exactly like hers. Maybe even add some cups in there if she needs support, whatever. So when you sew this in, and this has been shortened to 5, you still have the back of your dress is still 7, right? That means when she tries it on, this part right here is going to be all up in her business, way up in her business. So you need to warn her of that you're going to have to drop the armseye in the back. This is an alteration that you will do to the back. Very few alterations will be done to the back of the dress when you're shortening the waist, because you want the back shape to stay the same and you don't want to lose this itty bitty short detail. So this is where the shortening of the waist of the gown happens in the back. It's actually under the underarm. Now you know why people get that wrong. Like, who would have thought, right? That you're going to shorten the waist of the gown at the underarm in the back. That's crazy. But that's how you have to do that. All right, so this stays the same. Let's highlight again where all we've altered. Commonly, this is where all you will have altered to shorten the waist of a low back, open back gown. Do not leave yet. I know you feel like I just solved the deal and you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to go sew. No, because we've got to talk about the issues that we get into when we do this. Remember, there was nothing showing when she bought the dress and she liked the modesty. And then now look. All right, so this is a conversation you have early on in the alteration, because I'm going to show you a different way of altering besides just this. If we need to alter this a different way, it's going to cost more because you're cracking into even more seams and you're possibly gusseting, or she needs to make sure her dress is several sizes too big so you have plenty of fabric to work with. By far, the way to get the most natural fit, as far as the way the designer intended for the dress to sit on the bride and to be able to use the original cup shape and angle and size and everything that came with the dress, the absolute best way is to do this alteration I was talking about and to completely just lower the front and then do modesty work in the front to bring the V back up to where she originally wanted it. That would mean typically we like to work to where the shape is exactly as it originally looked to her when she tried on the dress. So that means we're not like putting a napkin in across the front, right? We're going to kind of recreate the same angle of the V as what was there. We're going to use similar background fabric, shell, and then similar lace appliques or whatever. Sometimes they can even order extra fabric from the manufacturer. And in that case, you can even cut out these new pieces. Cut out this whole deal here. Okay, so you can remove that whole, you can remove this whole front part. This whole front deal. Move this whole deal and use that as a pattern and cut out a new one with the higher V. Okay, if you have extra fabric. This is what's going to look the most natural with cracking into the fewest seams. It's funny, this is naturally not the first request of a bride. They think that this seems like a bigger deal, but I feel like we generally kind of get it right a little faster when we do this alteration. It just sits on her right, and there's just a little more peace when you see her in it the first couple times. You're like, yes, this is what we were going for. What they will generally ask you to do is they go back to what the stylist told them in the store. which, I mean, I'm torn on that. I get it. They got to move the dresses, but stylists are not seamsters. And it's really kind of like not staying in their lane for them to tell the bride how it would be altered. And they will so often say, oh yeah, you just take it up at the shoulders and see. And they literally just clip it at the shoulders and say, look how great it fits. So a lot of times they'll go back to that. When they go back to that, let me show you now the alteration that you'll get into with that. Because a lot of them will just go ahead and insist, and that's the way they want it, and that's fine. So you're going to leave the waist that was originally on the dress. That's going to stay. Side seams, same deal. If you need to fit the dress to her, I would just use the front half of the side seams and not mess with the back and make that back shape distorted, right? Take it in there. Remember, this is going to be all up in her business once you hoist these way up, right? So you're going to be shortening the strap. The strap is then going to be a little wider than what she wants. She might have you come in and narrow. You're going to have to drop the underarm on both sides. Again, you got to keep the same angle going as what she saw. Now, the apex of the bust was really way too high, remember? It was sitting up here 2 inches higher than the apex of her bust. Let me zoom in so you can see that. So now you're going to have to deal with that. You're going to have to bring this in. You often have to change the angle at the very top. It's arcing just way too much. Make the new apex down here where hers is. A lot of times you're having to let out there to get the shape that she wants. Now you've changed this so much, you often just have to disconnect the princess seam all the way down to the waist and feed this down, and you'll often have a little bit extra seam allowance down there at the bottom to eliminate your rumples. So this is all of the seams that you're getting into doing it the way she is requesting. And you guys can talk about that in the comments. Do you alter the way they request, or do you only alter for the end result that they request?
Woo! Guys, you are doing a great job hanging in with me for such an intense sewing project. I trust you are learning lots of great things, or at least getting lots of confirmation for how you do things. This next part is going to be getting the skirt adjusted, kind of to meet up with the bodice and the adjustments that we have made with the bodice, because often if you have to shorten the waist or shorten the bodice of a gown, there's some adjusting that you have to do to compress the curve in the hip.
You're often, to eliminate the wrinkles that come up in the skirt, you're going to need to kind of let this out up here to meet her shape. That's not normally a big deal. Sometimes you do have to gusset it. If you gusset, you're often looking at gussets here and here. These are the two most common gusset sites for this alteration. Then often you have to bring this in because it was the largest point of the hip, and now that it's dropped down, a lot of times you'll find the short-waisted brides, their hip happens higher and faster, and then it drops off. This is kind of body type stuff too. So why am I saying all this about where we generally tend to see the weight distributed based upon the length of the waist? Well, it's kind of important when you're planning the alterations, because if you're looking at a classic A-line, it may just smooth right all over this without having to make any more alteration. Whereas for this girl, you're seeing why we're gonna have to gusset. It's not just gonna work to shorten the waist because of the distribution of where her curves are. That is super important to keep in mind, how a bride with a short-waisted form may end up incurring more alterations in every area of the dress. It's not just more hemming at the bottom. The fit issues are distributed throughout the dress. So that's how you often get into a much higher bill for those alterations. I do recommend, if a bride consults with me before she buys a gown, if she is petite, she should need to try to, reach out to different salons, see if they have petite samples on the rack, if they sell off the rack, see if they carry those in stock, or she can try on the other gowns that are made for the taller fit models, only try on within labels that offer petite sizing.
That's some good shopping advice right there. Hey, let's go step by step now, slideshow style, real quick, and shorten this bodice. So this is how it looked before, and then I separated the straps completely at the top, and now I need to separate it at the side seams. So I'm going to peel that lace away and separate the more solid parts of the bodice. Now I am getting into the waistline area. I'm going to work my way across, separating both the lining and the outer shell layers from the skirt and the bodice. Now, as you can see, the lace layer is still intact. That's going to be a little bit trickier to make sure that that looks nice and natural when we're done. The seam in the tool is going to be a nice guide for keeping us straight while we work on this. I'm going to do an organic cut through the lace, and I'm going to take out approximately 2 inches, just a little less. That way, when we overlap, it'll be the 2-inch shortening that we're looking for. And we're going to put that back together. That will be hand sewn together in a very detailed way. Why did I cut through the lace and remove as opposed to picking the lace, shortening the tool, and then sewing the lace back on? A couple reasons. I did not want the lace to be double thick for that much of a length in the front of the bodice. It would make it very noticeable. The other reason is because we are also cutting away the underlayers. In order to restore the original length of this bodice, you would pretty much already have to lengthen every layer anyway. Why not have to restore the lace as well? It's very unlikely that anybody is going to go back and reverse this alteration, but if they do, it's going to be a pretty big project anyway, so it might as well look as good as it possibly can. Now let's shorten the lining layer. I'm literally just going to cut right through this and take out that excess length, okay? And there's the extra length. Now you can see the boning doesn't have stoppers on it right now. That's a problem. So we're going to go ahead and lift that boning off toward the end of the seam allowance and cap those bones. I serged the edge of that lining layer and capped the bones. Now it's time to sew it back together. You need to make sure, of course, that the fit of the skirt is adjusted like we talked about. Look for the notch in the center front. If it's not there, you can mirror fold your lining skirt and put a nice deep notch in there yourself. And you can see it right there between the pins, how I notched it. That way I could line the center front of the bodice and the skirt and the lining layers all together. Now I'm going to kind of distribute it with the pins. I usually like to start in the middle at that center front and work my way to the sides. And then that way I can do more side adjustment if needed when I get there. So this is what that's going to look like. Get all of your skirt layers sewn together and then move on lastly to the lace layer on the outside. Again, you're just going to be doing a very detailed hand stitch. Line up those princess seams and ease in where you need to. And you can see there's almost no trace of where you have worked. Next, you're going to get fresh pins for the shoulder adjustment that she'll need for her straps. And go ahead and put in a little basting stitch to try that out with her. You're going to cut away that extra height under her arm, like I was talking about, to shorten the back, and just do your finishing work, and she's ready for the aisle. I hope this has helped you. Hit like and subscribe.